Welcome to Unexpected Points. I'm your host, Kevin Cole. I'm joined today by Reiss of The Athletic. He covers the Houston Texans, and I don't know, I decided to have you on this week. It's kind of random, basically. Nothing really going on in Texas land. You know, no first-round pick, no second-round pick, not a lot of free agency money. So not a lot to talk about, I guess, right now.
Yeah, very, very quiet times aside from the fan protest that was planned on MLK Day to march to the stadium. But yeah, otherwise nothing really going on.
Yeah, it's protest season, so I guess
Right.
I guess there's another one. There's another one now. Yeah, so Watson is obviously the talk all over the place. I'll say that I misread this situation a little bit because I've been more of this reflexive instinct to think that superstar talent is going to stay put and
hmm
things will work out. And there was I guess the first inkling of problems in the organization. It kind of came on quickly. It was like there's a dissatisfaction. And now a few weeks later, as more and more reporting is going on, and in some ways, there's kind of like you have the one-upsmanship on this reporting. It goes from
hmm
Watson is dissatisfied to he wasn't included in the talks to he won't talk to the organization to there's no way to repair this relationship. So from your perspective as someone with your ear to the streets of Houston, what do you think is going on right now?
I mean, I think there's the truth is somewhere in the middle there. I mean, I think you talk to
Yeah.
people on his side of things who it all does line up to those stories to read that there's no way he's going to play for them again, or it's that he's played his last snap, or I don't see any way it can be salvaged even if they hire Eric Bieniemy or whatever. And then you have people on the Texans side that are just like, this guy's under contract for 5 more years. He's like one of the best players, the most important position in sports. Like we're not trading him, right? So I mean, I'm of the mindset kind of that like in January it is a lot of noise, right? I mean, like he doesn't even know who the coach is yet. How can he really say he doesn't want to play for him necessarily? I mean, obviously there are bigger issues at play than just that, but yeah, I think it's hard to really say one or the other right now. I think the big thing is like it seems like we're headed towards them getting in a staring contest of it, right? And who's going to blink first? Like, does Watson is he really seriously about sitting out games to really, force their hand? Are the Texans willing to kind of ride that to the end, And I think if I was a GM, like I would play it out, because I think even if you're willing to trade him and you get a huge haul, like you're just chasing the next version of him.
Yeah, I get that. I think that's where I was initially on this again, thinking that he wouldn't be traded. I mean, it's kind of unprecedented. I know that we're in the era of player empowerment. A lot of people think about the NBA when it comes to real superstar talent. It hasn't really come to the NFL with superstar talent. I only say that meaning the quarterback, basically. Like for these other
Mm-hmm.
guys that people point to have been traded, whether it's Jalen Ramsey, who was dissatisfied and got traded, or situations like that. Or Jamal Adams is another good example. I think you can argue that those teams in trading those players probably benefited in trading these
Mm-hmm.
players in a way. They
Yeah.
weren't in a position to win. They got multiple first round picks. They don't have to sign a long contract. All those things come together. I think Deshaun Watson is more analogous to how I see some of these NBA trades where if it's and let's say it's a Anthony Davis not too long ago there when he got traded to the Lakers, like it's almost impossible to recoup that value. There's no amount of picks. They throw out every single first round pick in perpetuity. They trade players, but you just can't get to that. That seems a little bit like what we're talking about with Deshaun Watson.
Right, because I think, like I said, even if you get 6 first-round picks, you're obviously devoting some of those at least to finding another quarterback. And chances are, just what we know about the history of the draft and stuff, like whoever you take is not going to be as good as Deshaun Watson. And I also think, kind of along the point of like that, we've not seen this with the quarterback. I don't know what you think about this, but part of it to me would seem that if the guy is good enough that he could leverage himself and command such a trade, he also is probably so good that the team is not going to ever be in such a disaster position that he would want to do so, right? Like
Yeah.
the quarterback would at least be competent enough that the team would be competitive, and there would be kind of you could at least believe like the situation is salvageable, right? I mean, I think if anything, that really speaks to kind of how screwed up the Texan situation is, how bad the rest of the roster is around him, that this guy could be clearly, by basically any metric, a top 5 quarterback this year, and the team could be 4-12, and he could be so unsatisfied that he'd want to come out.
Yeah, and the contract, I think, for Watson is a little bit different than what we talked about. Even in the NBA situations, where typically it's maybe a year left on the deal, they become an unrestricted free agent afterwards. I mean, for Watson here, we have 5 years left on him. He signed a 4-year extension, but that extension went on the back end of what he just played was the last year of his rookie deal, the 5th-year option, and then the back end of that. So 5 more years heading out here. And in the NFL, the franchise tag is affordable for at least 2 years. So we're talking about really like 7 years of control that they have over Watson if they really wanted to exercise it. So I think that's a whole big difference. But I will say, as I looked into this more, I can start to see how a new regime, everyone coming in, maybe could convince themselves that this could happen. I know you say, Watson's top 5 quarterback, right? But the team was 4-12. Like you mentioned, they don't have a lot of talent on the roster. Probably by some metrics, the worst defense in the NFL. On the offensively, a lot of resources have been dedicated to a decent offensive line, and the weapons that are around it, kind of expensive weapons also relative to their production. Will Fuller is a free agent. We'll see what happens with J.J. Watt. Over the cap, the 190, I think, is the cap number, 190 million next year versus what they're saying now today is maybe 180. So, if you're the Texans, you sit back and you say, listen, we don't want to make this deal, but let's say we can get the number 2 or the number 3 pick. I would say preferably the number 2 pick from the Jets. I think that's my favorite deal. So let's say you get the number 2 pick. You can choose your non-Trevor Lawrence quarterback, who is going to be paid on average, I think, over his deal, like $10 million a year, versus Watson's going to cost you whatever it ends up being, $40 million a year. I think it's more than that going forward because he is a little bit backloaded on that. So you're getting $30 million of savings. You could sign multiple, almost Pro Bowl caliber players to that. You're going to get draft picks, and you haven't had draft picks because you traded away a draft pick for Watson. You traded away a draft pick to get rid of Osweiler. You traded away multiple draft picks for Laramie Tunsil. You traded away a draft pick for Brandon Cooks. A lot of draft picks.
Brandon Cooks. We can keep going.
Yeah, a lot of draft.
Who played 8 games for this team. Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, that's part of the problem, right? Is there's no pipeline of young talent because they haven't had the draft pick. So this gives you a chance to reestablish that pipeline, free up cap space, maybe sign some free agents, bring in a rookie, and if all things go right, your ceiling is certainly higher if that quarterback can match Watson, which is very, very low probability, but we're talking about ceilings here. So your ceiling is certainly higher underneath this scenario. And, it gives someone like Caserio coming in, it gives him something to do, basically, other than just sit back and hope he can nickel and dime and find some players and really put his imprint on this team. Do you think that case is compelling at all?
I mean, I like, from just you and I perspective, looking at this in the vacuum, I think it's wildly entertaining. And I think that the idea I've talked about with some people, the only way you could sell this to me, is if you flipped on its head and it's let's go from being what's the butt of every joke to the most forward thinking organization. And we're going to get 4 first-round picks, and every 2 years, we're going to draft a quarterback in the first round. We're going to keep flipping the asset. And just, and then we're going to become that first team that does the only rookie quarterback contract thing or whatever. But obviously, I have no faith that that's what this team would do. There's no evidence that this team would think to be the ones to do that. Obviously, I don't know Nick Caserio very well yet, but I mean, I would have my doubts that would be the thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess if your hand is forced and you have to do it, and I think that's the only reason they would do it. I don't think they would look at it as he's a great value, we should just trade him. But if their hand is forced, yeah, the Jets are the one to me that is the most compelling. But of course, he has to want to go to the Jets. And the other thing I've thought about with this is the Jets do have some. Obviously, they have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year.
Yeah.
And I still think they have it. So I mean, they would still have some assets to build around him. But part of what's interesting to me here is his issues are bigger than just the roster not being good around him. But if he's going to pick the team he wants to go to, and that team then has to bankrupt itself to get him, and then there's no ability to build around him, is the problem somewhat cyclical? Is he going to go to another place and then it's going to be this, it's the same issues. The team is still not good because they did everything to go all in it for him. But on the other hand, I don't know, if you're a team and you have the ability to get him, I think you get him because he is one of the best players at quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen some hypothetical Jets trades in particular. I mean, the Dolphins also to an extent. I think there might be a little bit of bad PR because some of these trades, while it may align from a value perspective, like the Jets aren't going to give away. I've seen a hypothetical trade that said they'll give away both of their first rounds this year, both of their first rounds next year. It's like they're not going to trade away every first round pick
Right.
to do this, even if it is for Deshaun Watson, because like it's the Jets, right? You're coming off of maybe being the worst team in the NFL. How are you going to build around this? And you're taking on that contract and everything else to it. So I do think there could be a little bit of a pushback there, but you're right. If he forces his way out, that helps from a PR perspective, right? You're saying he forced their way out. Maybe also if, Jack Easterby, we'll see what happens with him. Maybe if he made some sort of exit, I think that would help from a PR perspective also. How much do you put into this Easterby talk? Because I'm gonna go over to him for a second, just because we've had multiple articles now from Sports Illustrated who have come out after him. It's really pile-on season on Jack Easterby now. And no matter how much my contrarian instinct, which gets me in trouble sometimes, will say, no matter how bad he is, can he possibly be this bad? Because there's no incentive to make him look better, I don't think, at this point, if you're reporting on him, then to highlight people who are coming out of the woodwork now to say negative things about him.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can link like a lot of the downfall of what's happened here to his arrival, but I also think like if Bill O'Brien didn't want to trade DeAndre Hopkins, he wouldn't have traded DeAndre Hopkins. You know what I mean? Like if Bill O'Brien didn't want to go all in on Larry Tunsil, he would have not gone all in on Larry Tunsil. Like the contracts were the contracts that they handed out, that was, led by Jack Easterby. And so he does deserve criticism for some of the really bad deals, whether it's, Whitney Merciless or Randall Cobb or whatever. But again, I think it's a little hard to know here, like, did Bill O'Brien want to keep Whitney Merciless and he was told to figure it out? Did Bill O'Brien want to be the one to get Randall Cobb? So I think the blame certainly falls on both of them. I don't think he is going anywhere. I mean, who knows? It's only January. The situation could escalate, but like to this point, Cal McNair has publicly backed him twice, like in the past 2 weeks, and they're going to have to figure out a way to coexist if Watson does stick around. That's kind of, to me, seems like not really worth the squeeze. Like, I don't know how much I would always pick the quarterback over the executive, but if Cal McNair wants to keep him around, they're gonna have to find a way to stick it out. I do think if they're honest about that Caserio is going to get a final say over personnel and kind of like Easterby is going to control a lot of the other, sort of like managing the building type stuff, then I don't know if his presence is as big a deal. I mean, he's certainly still a divisive figure, but I think it maybe is workable, less than ideal, but workable. But yeah, I mean, I just think the problems ultimately it ties back to a bigger thing with Watson too. It's all kind of ties back to Cal McNair, right? I mean, he is the one who chose to empower Bill O'Brien to do what he did. He's the one who ultimately allowed Easterby to kind of convince him to hire Caserio. He could have hired someone else if he wanted to. He was the one who chose to say to Deshaun Watson, we're going to keep you in the loop. And then there was some sort of miscommunication along the way. So I think even if you get rid of Jack Easterby, like it makes fans happy, maybe makes players happy, it maybe solves some problems, but like it doesn't solve the ultimate problem.
Yeah. I mean, I could see how his inexperience and maybe played into working with a strong-willed head coach who says, like you said, get me Randall Cobb. And then they goes, okay. And they go out and sign Randall Cobb to an awful deal, but you're fulfilling the wishes of
Right.
the true power center there. So I can see that. And I think it's always interesting when you have these circumstances with, I think I was talking about this a little bit when it came to Philadelphia and what happened with Doug Peterson and the relationship with Roseman there and Lurie, the owner. I think we tend to look at these organizations and the fact that a lot of these owners have these vast business empires. They are, lauded often in outside of the organization as being great businessmen, this and that. And then when it comes down to how they actually run these teams, it's just a lot of personal relationships, a lot of gut feelings, a lot of back scratching and political things that are going on here. And it's not the cold calculated hierarchical process as it is of he really seems to have a personal attachment to Jack Easterby at this point. And firing him, it may just seem like, stabbing someone in the back who you really have an affection for, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to like
speculate too much.
I was gonna say I don't want to poo-poo on him just for not necessarily being as into like stats as you and I are, but I think there was a moment that was really telling in the Nick Caserio press conference where he he said like that they were 2-8 in one-score games this year, and that was an example of bad processes that could be fixed with a better head coach and general manager. Like basically, you just need better guys in here to hammer down execution. And like I think obviously execution matters, but like we obviously also know that like luck matters a lot too in football, right? I mean, there's 16 games, and like we're talking about small sample sizes and things just break one way or the other. Like, and I think if you look at in 2019, the Texans were 4-5 in games in which they trailed at halftime, and 5-1 in games decided by 3 points or less. So they won 10 games, but they were probably not a 10-win team, right? And by the same token, maybe this team, like to his point, was not necessarily a 4-12 team, but more like a 6 or 7-1 team. But if you're just think that can be fixed by processes, like that to me is just an indication, that comment, that you're not really like looking at the whole full view of things, and you are being kind of easily convinced by one person's perspective on something, or you're not taking everything into account when you're making your decisions. And I think that is more than anything just kind of evidence in how McNair has let this thing unravel the way it has.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's probably obviously he has a organization full of people who have a record of failure, right? For this
Right.
year. So yeah, you better believe he's hearing every possible excuse for why things
Right,
for why things.
exactly.
So he's heard all of these. I mean, and I'll
But
also
he's
say
buying
that
them, right?
yeah, he
I
is
mean, that's
buying
the
them.
fault.
But I
That's the
mean,
problem. Yeah.
to be fair, I would say, like coach of the year, let's say it's going to be Kevin Stefanski this year. And I think Kevin Stefanski is great. Don't get me wrong. But, people win coach of the year for winning more one-score games than anyone else. It's kind of what happens a lot of the time here,
Right.
because they're more lucky than anyone else. So there's kind of like a long history of people overestimating the role of the coach in what is ultimately luck, because you can't really ascribe it to something else. You say we have talent, right? We have Deshaun Watson. We
Right.
have this top 5 quarterback. We have all these assets. We have J.J. Watt. We spent all this money on the offensive line and then on this, and we stink. So therefore, what else is left? What can I not really measure very well? And that's the coaches, and so I'm
Right.
going to say that it
So it
was
must be
their
that,
their
right?
fault. Yeah. So that, I mean,
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
can see how that happens. So for Watson in particular, okay. So I'm just thinking about we talked about the Bieniemy thing. So they can't hire him anyway until, I guess, after the Super Bowl, right? Because they can't. They have to. Well, I've already put the Chiefs to Super Bowl. Sorry. So until after they're eliminated, whenever that may be. So that's kind of on hold. So are we just stuck in a holding pattern here? That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking your life is going to be like Groundhog Day now for until whatever the Chiefs get out, because they can't like hire someone else before bringing Bieniemy back in. So they're stuck
Into
here, and then we're
talk,
just going to be
yeah.
stuck until what's happening. So are you rooting for the Bills to win, I should say? So then we could actually get some resolution maybe on this.
Yeah, I'd love some sort of resolution. Though on the other hand, I am fascinated by like how much more a seemingly already broken and unsalvageable situation can deteriorate. Like if they have to wait 3 more weeks, what other sort of leaks can come out in terms of updates about Deshaun Watson's unhappiness that make it sound like he is even more unhappy than the week before when he was totally over it. But I think you're right. I mean, I don't know, like if they were to hire Leslie Frazier or or Emmett Eberflus or whatever before then, I think that optically it does give the sense that you kind of you didn't care that much, or like the Bieniemy, interview was just an empty gesture or whatever. So you're probably right in that regard. But I think it's very interesting if they do hire Bieniemy, whether that does solve Watson's issues or not, because I think there is there's a chance that it doesn't, but based on kind of just like, this isn't just about the process of the head coach. It's about his feelings towards Easterby, his feelings towards the way that McNair just kind of treated him in general. And so if he still is upset, I think it'll be interesting, like how right now I would say the public support is totally on his side, right? Like I mentioned, people were going to march on MLK Day to the stadium, and so but does that shift if you hire the coach, you ultimately hire Bieniemy, you hire the coach that he reportedly wants, right? And then he still says, I don't want to play for this team. At that point, I think the perception maybe shifts, and I wonder how that kind of plays into this standoff between the two parties if it does get to that point.
Yeah. Now, and another factor here is the no trade clause that he has in his contract, supposedly. I don't know if that's confirmed or not, but I think he has the no trade clause, right?
He does, yeah. He
Okay,
does.
so Yeah, so because I know that initially there was talk about the Dolphins, and maybe that was something that was attracted to him playing for Brian Flores. I always thought that the Jets would have the inside track if they wanted to because of that number 2 pick and really being able to decide who it was. Um, social media. I just saw the other day that he liked some Instagram
Yeah, like
post
a New
about the
York
Jets.
Post headline or something. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So then, this has got to be great for his social media numbers, though. I have to say, he's probably like attracted. Not that he didn't have enough followers already. Okay, so there's that with the Jets maybe going in there. Do you think? I mean, how much do you think location matters? Because all these different trade scenarios we're hearing out here, is it possible that the Texans would have to take a lesser deal to satisfy where he want to go, or are we thinking? I just want to get out of here, basically. And wherever I'm going to go, assuming that they have the assets to get him, is probably going to be a decent place to land.
I mean, I don't see it. I mean, we're looking so far in the future here, but
Yeah,
I can't imagine a situation in which you would say it's one team or nothing, right? Because if you're reaching the point where you want to leverage yourself out, then you probably are open to more than just a single destination. Like if he's like, I want to be down playing for the Texans, I can't imagine him saying like, but if I can't go to the Dolphins, then I'll stay in Houston. Like I don't see it reaching that point. So I imagine it has to at least have a list, kind of, right? If this is following the sort of NBA superstar track here, like James Harden was originally just the Nets, and then it slowly became every team that had even like 20-1 odds of winning an NBA championship. So yeah, I think there would be other teams. I think the Jets, like you mentioned, would be a really good package. I also think I've thought the 49ers would be a really fun team for him. Just because I would love to see him in an offense. I mean, Tim Kelly, I think, was better at the back end of the year, but I'd love to see him in an offense that kind of like makes things easier, just on him, because we haven't seen that a lot in his career. My colleague, Ted Wynn, he pointed this out. I think it was you guys' numbers of PFF that Aaron Rodgers second in passer rating, completion percentage on boot plays. Only Deshaun Watson was ahead of him. And obviously I think Kyle Shanahan would do wonders with him. And he also, the Texans I think they're 29th in play action attempts this year. So like if he was in an offense that made life easier for him, like how good could he be? He's a top 5 quarterback without it right now.
yeah. I think that's an interesting one. I guess from my perspective, I think it would be hard to sell to the fan base like a Jimmy Garoppolo coming in or whoever it may be. Like I feel like it's a lot easier to sell the number 2 pick and the potential there. And
Definitely.
Even if you're not good, right? So even if you're not good in 2021, that's okay, right? You're fine. If you're not good in 2021 and you brought in Jimmy Garoppolo, things are going to be
Right.
a little bit ugly. So yeah, I think I agree with you there. Although I think with the offensive system thing, maybe there are more options there. When Robert Saleh came in to the Jets, he brought
Brought in the guys from San Francisco. Yeah.
one of the LaFleurs, one of the I don't know,
Yeah.
too
Mike
many now.
LaFleur, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Mike. I knew it was one of the.
Who was the one in
names.
dodgeball? Pete LaFleur?
I don't. There are too many LaFleurs. So he brought over someone, and so presumably they'll be running a similar system there. So I think.
Yeah.
So I think that is interesting. But let's talk about the rest of the team too, because this is going to be more. If Watson ends up staying there, there's a lot of work to be done here. Do you have any sense on the rebuild model? Is this going to, presuming that they keep Watson, let's say in this scenario, because if they don't keep Watson, then all bets are off. You could probably do a pretty healthy rebuild. How much of this roster do you think needs to be turned over to have something realistic here? Is someone like J.J. Watt, is he a definite trade piece either way? Things like that.
Well, I think Watt, it will depend on what he wants ultimately. I think they would, I think he has at least, I mean, who knows what the way this organization has gone in terms of communicating with its players and output, but I think that he's someone they didn't want to move at the trade deadline. They were kind of like saying it wouldn't be something they would even discuss unless they got a first round pick, which was never really realistic. So basically they weren't going to move at the deadline. So it at least wanted to be something they thought more about and maybe could, give him the proper respect and all those sorts of things. So I think if he wants to move, they'll move him. And, he said he doesn't want to be part of a rebuild, and he only has a few years left, so I think all signs would point to him kind of and ultimately getting out of here, especially if obviously they trade Deshaun Watson. If not, maybe a little bit less so, but I would think so, because, this team maybe is not as bad as its record last year. They did lose some close games and whatever, but I don't think they're probably, even if they're a playoff team next year, they're certainly not like a Super Bowl contender. I think the defense is so thin that it's going to take at least 2 years to really kind of get it back on track. And by that point, JJ Watt's 33. Like, is he still productive enough to, really be contributing? And, is that team really even then going to be a Super Bowl contender? Like, that's like best case scenario for this team. And I would say very little has gone best case scenario in recent times. So he probably is a trade piece. But he's kind of the only one. I mean, I guess the other one is like Brandon Cooks, if you wanted to, because he has, no guaranteed money left on the final 3 years of his deal. He obviously is very used to being traded at this point, but he's been productive with Watson, and if Easterby is around, I would doubt that, just because Easterby was the one who wanted, because he thought he'd be kind of a good locker room presence and stuff. So I don't think Cooks is gonna move. So Watt strikes me as kind of really the only big trade asset they have.
Yeah, the Cooks
Aside from Deshaun Watson, of course.
Right, aside from Deshaun. Yeah, the Cooks deal, I guess he's gone from, I guess it was from New Orleans to New England to the Rams
to Houston.
I think it was 3 first-round picks in there, right? And then just a second this last
time.
And then
second for Houston. Yeah. Well, but it's interesting because like Nick Caserio was part of the organization that traded a first-round pick for him, and then also traded him after a season. So it's like I don't know how what exactly Nick Caserio thinks of Brandon Cooks. It was funny at the his last Zoom session of the year, Cooks, like someone asked him, would you be open to or have you thought about the idea you could be, traded again because of your contract situation? And he was just like, I won't accept another trade. Like if you don't want me on a team, you got to release me. And then someone was like, how would you, how could you block that? And he was like, I don't want to get into it, because he can. Like it's right. Just so I don't know. But I think he logically to me seems more like a guy they would restructure the deal, lower the cap hit a bit. And then the question is, can you also find a way to fit Will Fuller? And if you want to keep Deshaun Watson happy, I think you try to find a way to bring both guys back.
Yeah. I mean, I could see trades for Cooks and for Watt. The problem is, what are you going to get? What are you going to get for even for JJ Watt? You're probably going to get like a 3rd round pick or something. I don't know if you're going to get anything that significant. Despite the fact that he may have high end play for a couple of years, Cooks may be something similar. So yeah, it would really just be like a cap dump type of situation.
Trading Watt alone would get them back under the cap.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So
that's like, because he's $17.5 million, I think.
Yeah. I see him. He's 17.5. It looks like Cooks is 12. Who else do we have on here? Duke Johnson looks like there's no dead cap there. He's a little bit over 5, so we'll see if he survives. There are probably some other ones on here that
David Johnson you probably cut, and that clears like $6 million. Bernard McKinney is the other one I think you probably cut. I think he would clear like $8 million alone too. And they just paid Zach Cunningham, and their run defense is pretty terrible when both the guys were playing, when one of them was playing. So I think he's probably another guy to go.
Well, what did you think of Caserio and his opening press conference? Because again, I'm not watching these things from end to end. So every clip that I've seen related to the Texans has been a question about Jack Easterby and reading into the body language and the answer or the deflection of whoever's being asked on here. But you're getting a more of a macro view here. So how did you think that he sounded in here? Or is it difficult for him to say anything until he's actually had a chance to assess things?
Yeah, I think it's a little difficult. Like he wasn't really he didn't give much of an answer in terms of like what type of coach you would value, other than like someone who could kind of unify things a bit, which I would agree they probably need somebody who can unify things. And he didn't say much in terms of like how much of a long-term or short-term rebuild he thinks this is. He kind of was like, I need to spend these next couple months really assessing everything and where it stands. But like, as long as if he really is in charge of personnel and I think there's no reason to doubt the reputation he built in New England. Like I think that alone will be just kind of a stabilizing force for this team, to have someone who has experience doing this and is like, that is their focus every day, not also coaching the team or anything like that. So at the end of the day, I think it's kind of a net positive. What's so weird about it is like, if you had told Texans fans even a year ago, maybe that Nick Caserio is the GM, they probably would have been happy about it. But it was just like the process of getting here, that every team normally is optimistic when they get a new GM, but the Texans are not, right? Like they can't even kind of manage to handle that.
Yeah, I mean, it was on the heels of O'Brien's firing last time, right? And yeah, I would say it was seen as a positive. There was a little bit of a bidding war in a way, not a bidding war, but whatever. There was a conflict as to whether or not they could get Caserio before. So I think that was interesting. I mean, he's been with New England his entire career, from what I'm looking at here, as far as his coaching career. I mean, he's a graduate assistant a couple places before that, but I'm not as coaching and then GM
In the
career.
NFL, 20 years in the NFL, all with
20 years in the
Patriots.
NFL, all there. The alignment is the rage in the NFL. Um, has Josh McDaniel been mentioned in this coaching
No,
search? I know he's
no,
been talked
no.
about. So okay, I know he's been talked about with the Eagles, and he's another guy, which is
Yeah.
kind of weird because when he was in contention for the Browns job last year, I think Browns fans, many of them were upset that he was not chosen and Stefanski was chosen. He's another guy that seems to be very low down on the ladder now for people who are looking at coaches. So I guess that would go for alignment. Is there an obscure Patriots coach out there, like a Joe Judge type, that can just come out of nowhere and go over? They haven't interviewed anyone there, right?
No. I mean, it seems like they know they can't lean further into the sort of Patriots reboot here. So they have not. I thought maybe they would put an interview for like Gerard Mayo. Haven't done that.
Oh yeah,
Brian
Mayo's
Dable
name's
is
been
another
out there.
one.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
Dable was overlapped with them in New England, and he supposedly kind of helped bring Easterby to New England, actually. But he was not ever requested, and it sounds like, or I've seen other people report that he's probably going to stay in Buffalo this year. So no, it seems like they at least have the awareness that kind of the you can't lean further into the New England thing now than having Easterby and Caserio. So they probably will find someone outside of that tree for the coaching search.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Dable could be interesting. I don't buy the I'm good. I don't want a head coaching job for a 45-year-old who's been around for as long as he has. Like,
Right.
I mean, 45 is not that old, but in today's NFL, it is a little bit older. I feel like he would probably. It's kind of like I didn't get the job, so I'll take my name out. So I think he could be an interesting name. So who else is in the running here? You wrote an article along with, who was it, Bo Wolf, where you guys were looking at the two
Yeah,
opening
back and
coach
forth
coach
between the
positions.
Eagles and
It was
Texans. Yeah.
were you guys, what was the approach? Were you guys trying to hype up your teams, or were you trying to both say no, your job is way better than than this team here?
I think we both are mired in like constant negativity. So we probably came at it from the latter perspective of like, there's no way that one is worse than anything is better than this. Yeah, no, it was kind of, I mean, I feel like if Watson is on the team, then the Texans are obviously the better of the two jobs, but the fact that that is a question speaks to like a broader dysfunction that would maybe scare me away from taking the Texans job.
Yeah, and it kind of seems like, how do you even accept that job, other than the fact, like I'm saying, it's one of 32 jobs, so you're just going to take it without that being resolved, right? I mean, is Deshaun Watson going to, I don't know, pledge that he won't request a trade or whatever, knowing
Right.
that
You
X
can't really
person is
know, right? I mean,
chosen?
he could be unhappy again in 2 months after you sign the contract, right? Like there's no way of really guaranteeing that he is on the team, but I assume whoever is going to take the job is going to not do so unless they have a pretty clear understanding of at least where he stands at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I would be perfectly fine just saying to Deshaun Watson, yes, no, what are you in or not? Like I would happily hand it over to him. But I'm sure that some teams would think that would set some sort of, dangerous precedent or whatever would be said, about players choosing the coaches, and then what does it say to the rest of the team, and this and yada yada. I mean, I think I would be fine. I would be fine with that. But so who are the other candidates that we have here? You mentioned Leslie Frazier. Has he been interviewed there?
Yeah, Frazier has been interviewed. Bieniemy has been interviewed. A Ravens assistant head coach and the wide receivers coach. I'm blanking on his first name. David Culley, and then Matt Eberflus, Indianapolis defensive coordinator. They also interviewed Joe Brady, but that was before they hired Caserio. Caserio has since kind of being the guy to take over the search.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I think Brady might.
Oh,
be
and they interviewed Brandon Staley, obviously, but he's
right
with the Chargers now.
Yeah. So Staley's with the Chargers now. Brady. I mean, I've been a little bit on the side of him being maybe a little bit too green right now. Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, I think Eberflus and Frazier are both good names. The defensive thing, I'm not sure how that plays into it. Nobody seems to want that right now. yeah, it'll be
Oh,
interesting
they
to
also
see.
interviewed David Caldwell and Marvin Lewis, but that was again before Casario.
Right. So those guys are, I guess Frazier. I know that I'm trying to think of his time with the Vikings as head coach. I don't think he was a winning coach overall there. Having taken over on I believe it was on an interim basis first, and then taking over there. But obviously Lewis and Caldwell have had very good track records, and I think those are guys that may be a little bit undervalued, especially in this day and age where people like me are killing people for not making these little decisions. These old school coaches making little tiny decisions about fourth downs and other things like that. That those guys may be seen as not being good. But I remember there was a study by Andrew Healy, who now works for the Browns, where he looked at coaching hires, and that was the one thing. There's basically no signal in anything. It's very difficult to figure out who to hire. A good offensive coordinator, a good defensive coordinator. The only thing that had some signal was previous success as a head coach. Those guys are typically better in their second time around, probably capturing like these kind of CEO leadership type of things. But you think those interviews were probably not at the top of the list?
Yeah, I think just because they were before Casario, I don't put necessarily a ton of stock in them. Though I agree with you. Like you think about like Marvin Lewis, for example, right? People always talk about how the Bengals are kind of unorthodox in their setup, and he won in spite of it. And in some ways, I feel like that is a very attractive quality when you think about the Texans. Like this is like a team that is, has various degrees of dysfunction that are kind of like unprecedented around the league right now. And if you can bring someone like that who can kind of like steady the boat and keep things moving forward, like that is a value. But yeah, I don't think that's necessarily going to sell really well. I mean, like he's like 0-7 in the postseason, which, I don't know how much we should put stock in that. It's like a small sample size, but I think that it would be hard to sell that when kind of one of the big criticisms of Bill O'Brien was all he could do was win the AFC South, and nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I do think that's another thing that's interesting with the Texans is we see it as this mess, this 4-12 mess. Yet, if you take a step back a little bit, like you said, overperformed a bit, but 10 wins, 11 wins, going back, I guess 4 wins, but that was when Deshaun Watson got injured as a rookie,
Right.
and then 9 and
And then
7, 9 and 7,
9 wins.
9 and
Yeah.
7. So not a lot of losing seasons, but yet this is kind of seen outside of Watson as being a team kind of really bereft of talent there. Okay, let's talk about some of the other things going on in the NFL outside of the Texans. There are teams still playing here.
I wouldn't know it.
Yeah, it's almost more exciting what's going on. Like I feel like for let's face it, for most of the league, the offseason is like the most positive part, or in like week 1 or week 2, and then it's like, okay, this is over. Let's go back to the next offseason. But for the teams who are recently eliminated or still in it, I wanted to see your opinion on this McVay Goff thing. Only because not that you're a Goff expert or I'm a Goff expert, but I think it's interesting because there's been this movement the last few years where guys like Goff, guys like Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm trying to think of who else would have played this year. I mean, Baker Mayfield would have fit into this if he didn't have a strong end to his season, where there's a certain subset of people that say, these guys are quote unquote system quarterbacks, whatever that means. It's highlighting the replaceability versus paying them $30-something million a year. So now the knives are really out for Goff here as someone whose performance, even on an objective basis, has gone down year over year, going from his sophomore breakout season. And that they say there's this disconnect with Goff and McVay. What do you think about these middling franchise quarterbacks? Versus, a team deciding, hey, maybe I am just going to take the plunge here and bring in a John Wolford type and just see what we can do with that extra cap space.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I think like the issue is not that Jared Goff is average, right? It's that he's paid to not be average, right? If you're paying him more like in line of 20 million or whatever, or like Phillip Rivers was like 25 million this year, like to me that's a good deal. The problem is when you're paying him quite a bit more. I think it's probably more of a worthwhile argument than ever before, just because passing in the NFL is easier now than ever before, right? And so I think there's definitely something to be said for it, especially if you have a coach you really can believe can get them the most out of a quarterback, which I think you could say Sean McVay can. But I think it ultimately, like, if that is your decision and that's the way you're going to go, I think it's a totally defensible decision, but it is going to depend on like how you use the resources that you're saving on the quarterback, right? Like, I would think I would probably want to spend a good amount of that money on the offensive line, and probably on like the secondary, and maybe like, and like one kind of dominant player on the defensive line. But yeah, I mean, so I think it makes sense. I think that Goff specifically, it's like he kind of is just so limited. Like, he can't even, he's not very mobile, and his year over year consistently, I know we say pressure is not how they perform on pressure is not really sticky, but it seems like for him, like, consistently is just not doing well. So I would understand wanting to move on from him. I just would be very curious as to like how they would then use the rest of those resources.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at their cap for next year. So Goff has almost a $35 million cap hit next year. So yeah, not cheap. Donald, see, now the problem is you got these years kicking in for Donald now, where his real big years are kicking in. So he's 28 next year. Ramsey is going to be 22.5, despite the fact that he's really just starting to get into his deal. Cooper Kupp 14.5, not too bad. Robert Woods another 14, as he just recently extended. So they just have a really top heavy team, and I think we saw in the playoffs where if you have a couple of those players who are Donald being limited, and obviously Goff having the thumb issue, it's just really difficult to compete with a team like that. And again, they're another team who also traded away a ton of picks in order to get Ramsey and in order to get Goff originally years ago. So they don't necessarily have that much of a pipeline. I guess my thing with this is I probably differ from a lot of people on this. What an average franchise quarterback type is worth, because I think it's easy from us from the outside to say, if you want to get that Super Bowl, it's really, really hard to do it with this guy, paying this quarterback top quarterback money. The problem is if you go away from them and then the quarterback position busts. I mean, we've seen situations like, let's say, when Deshaun Watson tore his ACL in 2017, where now you got a 4-12 team potentially. For us on the outside, we make that suggestion. The 4-12 starts to happen. We say, we don't even think about it. We're gone. We're at it. We're on to our take on the next team, right? We're on to our take on the next team. These guys have to live in that, right? They have to live in not having a quarterback, maybe not being in a position to draft a quarterback the next year, still having a bad cap situation, all of those different things. And I feel like those considerations are more difficult for someone who's from the outside to really think about than it is when you're a decision maker in that building.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's certainly like a human kind of cost to these things that we don't always consider. And if I think it would send a weird message to the locker room if a team is just like, yeah, this is our $20 million a year quarterback. We're just kind of punting on it, but we're just hoping everybody else can figure it out. I was reading a story recently. I think it was in CBS Sports that was like about kind of the Rams strategy, and because you mentioned it being so top heavy, and it was really interesting to me because like, obviously they did a better job of this than the Texans without a doubt in terms of building the team, but like, it was funny to hear a lot of these overlaps in terms of like talking about how if we're going to be picking in the 20s anyway, then the first round pick is not really worth as much as it sounds like it's worth. And if we took the average of the guys we're getting in the 20s, if we took two of them, we couldn't trade that person for Jalen Ramsey, but we could trade the picks for Jalen Ramsey. And like I heard a lot of the same things when the Texans traded for Laremy Tunsil. And so I think there is something to be said for the idea that we overvalue the picks and that you can build a team this way. But I think like it goes back to Goff, is like, it's just kind of about, did you use those picks on the right players, right? Like in the Rams case, like Goff is one of their 5 or whatever highest paid players, and he just is not good enough for that model to work. I mean, it worked pretty well this year, but not to the end goal, right? Of getting to the Super Bowl. And like similar with the Texans, like Laremy Tunsil is, a top 5 left tackle, at least in terms of pass blocking by like PFF metrics and grading and stuff. And like, at the end of the day, like Deshaun Watson, his sacks went down slightly, but I think we would all argue that was mostly because he did a better job of protecting himself against negative plays, right? And like, it didn't really ultimately impact winning, obviously. Like they went 4-12. So I think there's something to be said for the idea that we overvalue picks and we can, you can build a team this way. I just don't think I think it's a lot harder to do just because you're basically it's about probability of one guy being really good, or five guys being really good, and you're lessening your chances of that happening when you're relying on five guys versus like 20 good guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the getting a breadth of talent has been something that the Patriots have done in particular, have done really well. If you break down rosters by, like top 5 cap hits, top 10, and then the middle area, typically they've been a team that pays a lot in the middle area. I mean, part of that is the fact that they never draft super high, so and they never. Not never, but they don't normally extend like their really star rookie picks. Often they let them go out into free agency, and then they bring in guys in the middle. So I think that probably is like a sweet spot in free agency. And I mean, that's another part of the discussion, right? If you're not paying someone a ton of money, then you can get a couple of those players. And I think this whole thing of, well, the player's better than the first round pick that you're going to get back in return. I think we've seen that over. There's probably a handful of teams, right? So the Bears with Khalil Mack, that was a really weird trade where it was about 98.5% of the people thought that the Bears totally completely destroyed the Raiders on that, and now it's like, who knows what people think about that. The Eagles have done some of that, although not as much, but they've been willing to trade away some picks. And then you mentioned now the Rams and then the Texans being in that same thing, trying to maximize that quarterback window. So I think that they've pressed in as far as they can go with the Rams right now. The Ramsey was, I didn't think they'd even press in that far, and they went for it, even with Jalen Ramsey. I thought they were already done doing that. So it'll be interesting to see how they can dig out of this, because again, they don't have the draft picks, they don't have the capital to get out. And if they trade Jared Goff, I mean, what do you think Jared Goff can even get on the market right now with a contract that's going to cost you, let's say, $30 million a year?
Yeah, well, so I was looking this up, and I think his dead cap hit for the Rams would be $6.8 million if you traded him after June 1st. And so what is his total cap hit is like 35 or something next year.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess the team that would get him would be like 30 million. That'd be what would be on their books. I mean, that would not be great, but it wouldn't be like wouldn't be too bad. I don't know. I mean, like, would you give up a second round pick for him? Like, just kind of just baseline competence. He's not amazing, but he's solid, and and the value is, if they're taking on a lot of the bonus money that they signed, then you're not paying him an egregious amount. I mean, maybe that, but yeah, I don't know. It seems to me like they'll probably have to be stuck with him for at least another year.
Yeah. I mean, I see there's an out in a couple of years down the road, so maybe that could be part of it. But yeah, second round pick probably seems about right for that. Okay, let's hit some of these games in the conference championship real fast. I think with both of these games, it is, well, more so. Let's start with the AFC. So we have. Let's assume for the purpose of this discussion that Patrick Mahomes is going to pass the concussion protocol, all of that stuff there. Being an observer of the AFC and what's going on there, what's your opinion on the Bills now going forward? Because I think the Bills and Josh Allen's been very strong this year. A lot of this is going to depend on Josh Allen. In the playoffs, he hasn't been great in the playoffs. He was pretty good against Indianapolis, but again, that was a close game where he had a fumble there at the end that wasn't recovered, that could have been, and then Indianapolis still had the ball to potentially win the game or tie the game with a field goal. And then against Baltimore, it was close there for a second before the pick six. And I think he had another play where there was a fumble that he gave up, and he didn't play like outstandingly well either. So I think most people are of the opinion that the Bills really can hang with the Chiefs here, and that Allen, because the Bills played so well in the second half of the season going forward. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I think they can. I mean, I think if Mahomes is playing, I still like the Chiefs in the game, but I think they can. I mean, you look at the last time these teams played, right? The Bills kind of totally sold out against Mahomes, so the Chiefs ran for like 200 yards, but I think Matt Milano didn't play in that game, and their run defense has been better in the second half. So I think if they want to stick to that plan again, maybe which I think is a solid plan. I mean, it's kind of what the Texans did when they played the Chiefs in Week 1 too. I think that could work out. And I was looking this up before. I think in the first matchup, Diggs and Beasley were both Cole Beasley were both pretty neutralized in that game, and I would guess that they're going to have some more solutions at the next time they play, and that wouldn't happen again. So I like the Bills to at least keep it close. But at the end of the day, I think if Mahomes is playing, I would take the Chiefs.
Yeah, it was weird because it was a close game, despite the fact when you look at the Chiefs, they ran the ball well. I don't think Mahomes played poorly. I mean, but he still had to convert some third downs down the stretch to eventually seal the game. And there were also plays on the other end where there was like this misty rain, something going on there, where Josh Allen was almost hitting or missing some throws that it looked like he could have been successful. So that's why I thought that strategy was really interesting. And I want to see what's going to happen in this game, whether they're going to implement that again, because in a way, you're almost keeping it a little bit closer. Like you're giving yourself a chance against the Chiefs if they're really going to run the ball like that, because you have to continue to convert these third downs, and sometimes that doesn't happen, as opposed to opening it up and the Chiefs just get a score very quickly. That's the whole difference. I mean, I think a good example of why you don't want the Chiefs to open it up is probably what we watched in the I guess it was the divisional round last year against the Texans, where
when they ran out of fireworks at the stadium.
When there was I guess it was 28-0, right? And
24-0. Yeah.
24-0. Sorry, don't mean to besmirch the Texans here. So 24-0.
Right.
And then I don't
28,
think
they would have had it. Yeah.
I don't think I think they scored 6 straight touchdowns or something like that. And on the first few, I think they just threw the ball like every single play. There was no pretense of even thinking about running the ball. And that seems to be the most effective offense for them. So I'm wondering, are they going to try to goad them into doing that again? Because in a way, I thought the Browns tried to do that, and the Chiefs didn't really take the bait in the first half, and they were still just continuing to move the ball down the field.
Yeah, it's kind of like I know people have written, like, even at The Athletic, we wrote about how the idea of, like, you just got to run the ball, control the clock, keep Mahomes off the field, like that, how that's kind of a fallacy. But it kind of is like goading the Chiefs into running is almost like a version of that strategy in itself, right? Because you're asking them to kill the clock and lessen the number of possessions in the game, and basically increase the randomness of the game, and just hope that, like, your team can kind of capitalize on 1 or 2 mistakes. So yeah, I don't know. I still think that is probably the best strategy to stop them. Like, at the end of the day, I would rather just kind of make them beat me methodically. I think they can still do it, but it sounds like, just like if I'm playing the probabilities, there's probably a better chance of winning that way. And
what's weird is the Bills on the other side. I mean, if you look at last week, right, there were conditions. There's a lot of wind against the Ravens. In that game against the Chiefs, again, the conditions were not great. I feel like the Bills, more than anyone, I think there's only been 1 or 2 games this season. I'm trying to think of which. There was definitely one game where they ran quite a bit at home, but I don't remember who it was against. It could have been like at the Jets or somebody, so it doesn't even count. But the rest of the season, they've just been throwing it. I mean, it does not even matter what the conditions are. They don't seem to have any faith or inclination of using their own running game. So I think that's an interesting thing too. If both teams did the same thing, and I don't know if the Chiefs really like to play that style of defense, honestly, to hang back, but if both teams did the same thing, I'm in some ways I'm more confident that the Bills will just continue to throw the ball as opposed to the Chiefs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It seems like the Bills just have no interest in it. And they've kind of, but my question is, like, in terms of a favorable matchup, I think the Chiefs are probably the worst of the 2 run defenses, right? Yeah. So, like, would it make sense for the Bills? Because I think but the question is, like, even though that's the case, would it still be more efficient of style of play for the Bills to throw, like, if given the choice? It seems like it, I mean, based on everything we know, probably yes, right? So you probably would still want to continue to play the way they're playing, but yeah, they seem less dependent on even trying to run the ball. It seems like the Chiefs at least have put some resources towards it, whether it's Le'Veon Bell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills have really done this thing where they truly have substituted in these shorter passes and some quick passes for running plays. I mean, I was looking at a lot of Allen's stats. I'm looking at a potential article to compare him to other quarterbacks in this 3rd-year leap. I mean, it's totally insane what he did as his 3rd year. Like, you don't really ever see this. I found Troy Aikman was someone who made a pretty big 3rd-year leap, but again, it wasn't even to the level that we're seeing of Josh Allen now, and he was coming off of a baseline of like the worst team in the NFL for a couple of years before going into that. But if you look at what he did, his completion percentage went up a lot more than his yards per attempt. I mean, his yards per attempt also went up. So if you take those two things together and you say your completion percentage went up a lot more than yards per attempt, you can figure out the difference there by saying that your yards per completion did not go up as nearly as much. So that kind of explains what they've done offensively, right? Is that they're taking the shorter passes essentially, and substituting those in for runs.
Yeah, no, definitely. What is the? I'm sure you looked this up. What was the expected completion percentage for him in year 2 versus year 3? Like, is it way higher now?
It is, although I don't know. I don't have that in front of me. I believe that it is, but there is a little bit of a difference in that he was hitting some of these passes that he hadn't been hitting before. So that's part of it. But yeah, that's definitely some of it. I mean, it'll be a really interesting matchup because I've been shocked even myself how many times this year that I've been describing the Bills' offense and Josh Allen kind of the same way you describe like Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense. Like they don't want to run the ball, really great at making plays on third down, really great against the blitz, really great against man coverage, all these things that you would say about the Chiefs offense and how you have Kelsey and Tyreek Hill who can get open in all those circumstances. Now on the other side, you're saying you have Stephon Diggs and John Brown and second team All Pro Cole Beasley that are able to do the same exact thing. So I think that's super intriguing. You have any inkling now? You want to give me a pick here for who's going to win? Do you have something spicy? Can you go out for the Bills? Can we get you on record? Bills Mafia would love it.
I think if Mahomes plays, I'm gonna go with the Chiefs. But I think it'll be really close. I think it'll be like 35-30 or something like that.
Yeah. Let's hope so.
What's your pick?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the Chiefs. I mean, I think there's a big thing about the one-score game thing, and the Chiefs winning all these one-score games. But if you look at it, a bunch of those games, they were up by multiple scores in the fourth quarter or in the third quarter, and then it ended up being one score at the end. And the Chiefs have been really bad at converting these like short third downs with running the ball, and they've been giving up a ton of conversions on the other side of the ball. So I think that will maybe even out a little bit more. You don't have to worry about giving up those conversions as much against the Bills because they don't run the ball very well. And I think some of it's just been some bad luck for them. So I think that's also kept teams close because they haven't been able. They've had to punt a few times in circumstances where they should have just been able to hand off the ball a couple of times and pick up a first down, and they haven't been able to do it until the final drive where they stopped doing that. And they just let Patrick Mahomes pick up the first down and end things. Okay, so let's go over to the Senior Bowl, the Old Timer Bowl on the other side of things. Rodgers versus Brady. This is another game where I don't know what to think on this one. I've been a little bit more down on Brady than I think a lot of people have, than our grading has. I mean, our grading had him as a top 5 guy pretty much the entire season, despite the fact that his numbers weren't there because of a lot of drops and a lot of big negative plays that he had that were not graded necessarily as harshly as it would be in something like expected points added formula. What do you think about the gap between those guys right now? Because it's a 3-point spread right now, and using that for a reference, it's not that high, honestly, for a Green Bay team, which looks kind of unstoppable right now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I feel like that number is probably a little biased towards the last game between these two teams, which doesn't seem to me like a representative of where kind of the quality of these two teams. Like, I think what was it, like, I was looking this up, I think would Rodgers throw this year 5 picks, and like 2 of them came on back-to-back drives against Tampa. So I mean, just odds are he's probably not going to do that again, right? And like Devontae Adams was in his first game back from hamstring injury, and I think both those picks actually were targeting him. So again, like I think he's going to be more productive than he was in that game. So I think it'll probably be a close game. I don't see Brady getting like his ass kicked in a playoff game, and I think that the Bucs defense is really good. But I do think that the Packers are ultimately the better team, and to whatever degree weather does play a factor, I like them kind of like having a little bit of an advantage there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been burnt on this many a times, but I've been kind of waiting for Rodgers to, he's not going to like collapse or something, but his level of play, I've been skeptical that it would maintain at the level it's been, despite the fact that he had this great reputation. We've had this like flip on him where everyone thought he was playing at an elite level when he wasn't, and now this season he really has been there. And the Bucks game was the one game where I was thinking to myself, okay, here we go, right? Right? They got some pressure on him. They pressured him a ton. I think it was the only game this season where he was under pressure 40% or more of the time. Although there had been some other games where he's come close, but he was under pressure a ton, and then they just kind of collapsed. The offense collapsed, and then they got behind, and then it was just extremely difficult to work it. How much do you think coaching matters in this one? Because again, it's tough to define these things, but if you look at the charts that are put together, many of them by the Athletic's own Ben Baldwin, where he's looking to look at teams that have gained the most win percentage by fourth down decisions, or not. Well, I guess it's lost the least win percentage. I don't know if anyone's gaining anything. Have lost the least versus the ideal. It is the Green Bay Packers are right there as being the best. The Buccaneers being the worst. The Bucks seem to be somewhat obsessed with starting off their drives, running the ball for 2 yards with Leonard Fournette before they actually try to have some offense in their drives. And I guess just generally that back and forth. You see one guy being very shrewd on the cutting edge of these things in LaFleur, and then Arians on the other side. How much do you think that coaching matchup really plays into this?
I think it definitely can. I mean, because I think it's going to be a close game. So if like LaFleur's extending, a drive with a few, going for a fourth down where Arians wouldn't, and he gives his team kind of, one or two more visits to the red zone, like I think that can ultimately be the difference here. But I do think that the rod bigger than that. I think kind of the big question will be if they can continue to get to Rodgers the way they did in that first game, like you mentioned, being pressured 40% of the time. Because if they can, then I think it kind of throws everything off balance, and it gives the Bucks a bit of a chance.
Yeah, but interesting. I think there's also an element of, Rodgers is not playing in. He's not as reliant on the play action and the system as a Jared Goff or even as a Baker Mayfield, but he's kind of in a hybrid. Like, he's using that a lot. They do use a lot of empty and other stuff too. But this is one of the few times where I think with Vita Vea coming back, maybe if they can like plug up the run, I do think that affects the Packers more for what they do. If you look at like the touchdown they got to Allen Lazard last week, that's almost entirely based upon the fact that they could play action and have these guys bite in and then beat them over the top. So I think that's an interesting point. Now, from the NFL's perspective, who do they want in the Super Bowl? Do you want Tom Brady or do you want Aaron Rodgers in the Super Bowl? Because let's think conspiracy theory. I got my tinfoil hat on here.
Oh, man.
Who are the referees gonna put in here? Because I think there's a case for either one of them.
I feel like, I don't know. I personally feel like Brady is like the more fun narrative, because I'd kind of just like that he's just like kicking Belichick's butt in terms of who was more responsible for the greatness sort of argument here. So I think that would be really fun, and also just like him getting to play, first team actually host the Super Bowl in their home stadium or whatever. That would be kind of nice. Though on the other hand, I guess the NFL wouldn't be as incentivized by that this year, since there won't be as many fans in the stands. But I my guess is Brady. That's who they would want. What about you?
Yeah, I totally forgot about the fact that we finally solved the Belichick Brady 100% in Brady's direction, 0% for Belichick, which I like, because coaches don't matter is a little bit of my thing here. So, all right, well, we reviewed it all. We went over the Texans, the most interesting team. I thank you so much, Aaron, for joining me. Have an interesting few weeks here. I hope things get resolved, and I hope for your sake. Actually, I don't know. Do you want? Okay. From a personal perspective, I know it's interesting. We think about teams, right? And we think about the players on the team, and the players is saying, like, if Deshaun Watson leaves, you have a down season, you have a rebuild. We got to start thinking about the beat writers too. You guys have to go through a rebuild, right? Like you have to be part of a rebuild. So we don't want to rebuild for you either. I think that's a key point. So so for your sake, hopefully this thing gets resolved, and you won't have to waste your best years as a beat writer on a rebuilding team. So I hope for that for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is when I have the most energy and the most, I'm only going to get worse as time goes on. So I don't want to be wasting this time on a bad team. Truthfully, regardless, if I'm gonna cover a bad team, like I'd rather it be a team that has a lot of interesting stuff going on, and I think you can at least say that for the Texans. Like I'd rather be doing this than covering some like middling 7-9 team that has a quarterback that everyone agrees is not that good, but they're not really in a position to get a better one, and whatever. So regardless of what happens, I think it'll be fascinating, and I'm looking forward to writing about it.
Yeah, it'll be a good off season. It'll be you get a lot of clicks. You got the clicks going, although you guys don't do clicks over there at the Athletic, but get them anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, anyone listening, please rate, review the pod. Let me know what you want going forward. Hit me up on Twitter at Kevin Cole PFF. Are you at Aaron Reiss? Is it just your name there?
Aaron J. Reiss. Someone else took Aaron Reiss. I'm not sure who it is. There actually is another journalist who is named Aaron Reiss, and sometimes we get like crossed emailed, but he writes about much more important things like gentrification and like stuff like that. So
did you get hate mail? Do you get or hate tweets about what he's writing?
Every now and then. So he writes for like what makes it even more confusing is he also sometimes writes for the Atlantic. So it's just
Yeah, I remember that. I think when Jamel Hill went over to the Atlantic, there was like an athletic thing going on there. So
right.
Reading comprehension, not so high there. But again, thanks, man. I really appreciate the time, and I'll be looking out for everything you're writing this offseason.
Sounds good. Thank you.